Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Underground. This is the Intel update for October 13th through the 19th, 2024. So let's get right to it. I'm going to spend most of the time today talking about a news story that I did not mention in the wire, but has subsequently become kind of a very inflammatory topic over the past week, and that is the changes that have been observed to DoD Directive 5240.01. So as many of you have probably already seen, there were some changes to a Department of Defense directive that have gotten people a little bit upset because, well, the implications are pretty severe once we get into it. So rather than just coming at this with outrage, let's try to be a little bit more open-minded and let's see if we can figure out what this whole thing is about. So the very first thing that we need to understand is that there is a trouble with the naming of this document. So you might be inclined to see the number 5240.01 and think that it's all just one document. This is not true. There is a DoD manual 5240.01 and there is a Department of Defense directive 5240.01. I don't know why the Department of Defense chose to use the same exact number. I think they were probably trying to combine these at some point, and we'll get to that in a moment. But the manual one, was written in 2016, and it is 56 pages long. It is still in effect, okay? So that document is still in effect. I've seen a lot of people, and we'll get to this when we come to the fact-checking portion, right? I've seen a lot of people try to say that the manual is what has changed. Now, the manual has not changed. 5240.01, the manual, written in 2016 or released in 2016, that has not changed. It did not become anything. It did not transition anything. This is the most current version of that. What did change is the directive. DoD Directive 5240.01. So just to be absolutely clear, there is no relationship other than they're kind of on the same topic, but there's no relationship like doctrine-wise between the 2016 manual and the changes we're going to talk about today. And you can actually see this on the webpage where these documents are actually listed so that you can download them. This is the Department of Defense Senior Intelligence Oversight official webpage. And you can see at the very bottom here, they're two separate documents. The only change between them is directive versus manual. So just to be absolutely clear, the 2016 manual version has not changed since 2016, with a slight caveat. I'll get to that in just a moment. What has changed is the 2007 directive. So there is a DoD directive, 5240.01, 2007 edition, and there is a DoD directive, 5240.01, 2024 edition. That was actually signed into effect on September 27th, 2024. So that is what we're talking about here. This is an important distinction to make when we get, again, to the fact-checking part. So originally, the 2007 document was only 7 pages, and the recent version, the 2024 version, is 22 pages, so 3 times longer, right? So we can see how this might be a little bit concerning. Now, before we get into why this might be concerning, let's take a look at the names again. The 2016 manual is titled Procedures Governing the Conduct of Department of Defense Intelligence Activities. Makes sense. The 2007 directive is simply called, it's a directive, right? So it's not the same format as a manual. This is called DoD Intelligence Activities. That's what I knew it as because this was in effect when I was an Intel guy, right? That has since changed to a new format. So, very, very loose theory right to start with is that this is a formatting change from 2007 directive to a more manual type thing. So, just right off the bat, I think that the majority of what this document is trying to turn this old school, old style directive format into a manual, okay? And so that kind of explains some of the changes because the new format matches the manual. So they took the 2007 directive and they're trying to update it to match the manual, if that makes any sense. So most of the time when you see a DoD directive, we go by the number, right? Well, this is trying to modernize that and bring it into this new format where we're talking about the title, which is, the new title is DoD Intelligence and Intelligence-Related Activities and Defense Intelligence Component Assistance to Law Enforcement Agencies and Other Civil Authorities. So, again, names and the naming conventions kind of matter. And as we can probably tell, this has got a whole lot of new stuff in it. So let's talk about that. So with the understanding that this is probably a formatting change sneaking in a lot of other content, let me just cut right to the chase and tell you guys what I think. Because, for one, I would very strongly encourage you guys to read the document. Okay, it's not that long. It's only 22 pages. Read it. And read the 2007 version as well. And compare the two. Do it on your own. It would take me days to get through it. Bottom line, though, is that this is concerning, but in none of the ways that a lot of the more clickbait kind of content has talked about. So let me explain what I mean by that. So skipping forward just a little bit, let's take a look at this quote here, the responding with assets with potential for lethality. This is the line that's got everybody in a tizzy, and I'm sure a lot of people have already talked about this particular paragraph in the context of them trying to say that this authorizes the Department of Defense to kill Americans on American soil in violation of, well, whole sections of U.S. code, right? So, is this what this says? I don't know, but I have a hunch. I have a theory, and I think I know what this is about. But again, this is just me purely speculating on this. There's no backup to this other than how I understand and my own history of kind of interpreting DoD policies. So, a lot of people are hung up on this section here, the responding with assets with potential for lethality, because they probably did a control F for the word lethal and found that in the document, and now they're freaking out. But they didn't read the whole document, or they just skimmed it, and they don't understand how DoD directives work. So let's go back to what I think happened. What I think this is a JAG officer or some kind of military legal authority, right? A lawyer within the military who wrote this. This is classic military lawyer speak. And I would even go so far as to say, because this is how 99% of all policy works in the DoD, is this was probably a senior officer looking to make a star or looking to make some kind of promotion. So they put this in there. But they didn't just put this in there, they gave us clues. Because I have a very sneaking suspicion, based on previous versions of this, have been released to the public. So, if something has to be released to the public, or declassified to release to the public, does that not imply that there's probably a classified version of this? That's my guess. Pure speculation. My guess is there's probably an addendum or something that's classified to this that goes into more detail. And my thinking is that that military attorney probably saw that, and they're trying to talk around a lot of stuff here, so they can't actually say a lot of things, which is where you get this very strange assets with the potential for lethality line. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense unless you come at it, if you try to put yourself in the shoes of the guy who wrote this, right? If you're just going to say, lethal force, why not just say lethal force? Why assets with the potential for lethality? And here's a little bit of other back pocket information. So, a few years ago, it's always been kind of publicly contentious for military assets to be used on American soil. That's why we have Title 10, we have Title 50. So as many people know, or maybe don't know, most federal troops are not allowed to serve in an active duty component on U.S. soil. So there's a difference between Title 10 and Title 50 orders. We saw this with the Hurricane Helene thing. A lot of active duty guys were sitting there, sitting on their hands, not being able to do anything because they did not have the right title orders. They're federal troops. They need to be put in the service of the state. It goes way back to the Civil War kind of era. So again, this is a very big contentious thing, and ever since we started using a lot of different kinds of intelligence collection assets, maybe you see where we're going with this, the federal assets being used to assist the states has always been a point of contention, and it's kind of questionable legally wise, at least. So with that in mind, let's talk about what I think this is referring to. I think this is referring to drones. I think that this line right here, skipping forward a little bit, I think this responding with assets with potential for lethality is referring to armed military drones, not the unarmed drones that are used by Border Patrol agents. That's just my theory, because that makes a lot of sense. Not every single drone in the U.S. arsenal, such as this one, is capable of being armed. A lot of them, they physically cannot put Hellfires underneath the wings. Now, a lot of them have been retrofit and things like that, but for the most part, you've either got an armed drone or you don't. at least in terms of what I know is currently being fielded and used, or at least is publicly so. So maybe you've got yourself a military unit that has deployed to Afghanistan or Syria or Iraq or the Middle East or somewhere, and they've got themselves a nice shiny drone sitting in their hangar at their base. They can't use it on U.S. soil because it's legally contentious, right? It doesn't even have to be large-scale drones like this. It can be smaller ones like the Shadow system. We got a bunch of old drones sitting in a lot of warehouses for military use, and they have nowhere to go. So what I think is this is referring to that. The drones that have the potential to be armed being used on American soil. Now, do we need to skip right to the end, and are we going to say that this is targeting American citizens with drones? I don't know. We'll talk about that in a moment. But just me thinking, that's my personal opinion, is I think that's what this is referring to. A lot of people are saying this allows a J6 kind of event to occur again, and the troops to be authorized to shoot to kill kind of thing if people want to protest. Well, I think that, okay, fine, valid concern. If you want to be concerned about that, let's be concerned the right way. I hate to break it to people, but on January 6th, this was not in effect, and troops were still issued live ammunition, okay? So troops were already going to kill American citizens if they were given the order to, without this being in effect. So what's your concern? If you want to be more concerned, I'll give you some more doctrine and publications here in a moment. But by and large, what I've been trying to research since I saw this kind of hit the internet is, one, are these concerns valid? And two, if they are valid, have they always been in place? I.e., are we just learning now that the DoD has always had this policy and they're just putting it in a new document, rephrasing it so that we're now paying attention to it? So that I don't have a solid answer to. I have a sneaking suspicion that this has always been the policy, because we have other publications that I'll mention in a moment that kind of, show this. So really, the entire ecosystem of Executive Order 12333, DoD Directive 5240.01, the Manual 5240.01, there's an NSA regulation, there's a bunch of other, doctrine and policies and directives. These have all been really sketchy over the years, like seriously. Like, they're all very sketchy, and they've been around since the 80s. This is not something new. This isn't even like Patriot Act stuff. This goes back a long way. So what is the biggest threat to this right now? Is this, because this document was published, am I going to worry about, my local police department striking my house with a hellfire? Not right now, because one, if they're going to do that, they're already going to do that. But mostly, the biggest concern that I have is scrolling back a little bit in this document, right? Don't hit Control F for the word lethal and read the paragraph that came before this, paragraph 3.2, which is an entire page showing the permissible assistance. Basically, how the military, how active duty military troops can serve local law enforcement capabilities. And newsflash, most of it is intelligence sharing. So now maybe the picture starts to become a little bit more clear. This is less about another J6 kind of killing Americans, with rifles kind of thing. This is more along the lines of federal intelligence agencies and law enforcement becoming one, with the eventual goal of striking people on U.S. soil with more deliberate assets than just a National Guard rifle, right? So that's what I think this is about. This is where the concern that I have lies. It's more along the lines of a deliberate coordination between the federal and the local law enforcement entities to allow this in the future. So just putting myself in the shoes of the dudes who wrote this, right? If I was a malign actor in government, right, and I thought that the American people were my enemy, I work in government, the American people are my enemy, this is exactly the kind of regulation I would write, because it sets up the ability for me to work with local assets to target the American citizenry. So that's concerning, right? It really is concerning. Does it mean that your local sheriff is going to have the ability to drone strike your house? Not yet, but it's setting the groundwork for that to happen. Now, the reason that I say not yet is because of the other publications, again, which we'll get to in just a moment. So again, just to kind of summarize what I think this is all about. Again, I'm not an expert, not a legal expert for sure, but I do have some experience with this, because 5240.01, the manual at least, we had to memorize that as being intelligence guys, right? We were actually required to carry around little business cards with that regulation on it at all times, because you're supposed to, that's the governing regulation for what intelligence you can collect on American citizens. Well, what does this do? This directive now brings together even things like targeting. So it's not just intelligence. The intelligence part's the most concerning to me, because we've never really had that well of a relationship between national, federal, active duty intelligence services, in the military at least, and law enforcement. They don't really talk to one another that much. So this sets that up to be possible and legal, according to the Secretary of Defense at least. So the answer to the question, did the Pentagon just authorize themselves to use lethal force against Americans? In this document, yes, probably. However, the next question must be asked, which is, did they already have this authority anyway? And the answer to that is, yeah, probably. So again, did this document really change anything with regards to the lethal force stuff? Not really. What it did do, though, is start to bring together these assets from a federal level down to a state level, down to a local level, and make it all, like, set up the ecosystem for this to work. So just to kind of alleviate these concerns, but create other concerns as well, did this really change anything? Not really, overall. I mean, if someone had walked up to a National Guard soldier on January 6th, or really actually January 7th through the 20th, right? That period where they're putting tens of thousands of National Guard guys on federal orders in the National Capital Region, right? If someone had walked up to one of those soldiers and one of those soldiers had shot that person in the head, it doesn't really matter what the paper says. They're dead anyway. It doesn't really matter what a piece of paper says. Rules of engagement matter more. And if the soldier can say they felt their life was in danger, that was within the rules of engagement. So it would have been legal and pencil whipped either way. They don't need this document, which was written over a period of years, okay, to make that legal, right? So again, rules of engagement, things like civil support to authorities, which we'll get to in a moment, again, that kind of thing is way more important, I think, than this. Now, does this mean this document is worthless and is not any good and this is all fake outrage? No, it's not all fake outrage. It's mostly fake outrage. If you're going to be outraged over this, be outraged in the right way, at least I think, which is that the lethality part is not as concerning as yet. It's not as concerning yet because there's other things that cover lethal force. So the lethality line here is not as concerning as the normalization of using federal assets such as armed drones on U.S. soil, and I have a very sneaking suspicion that they're already doing this. I have no evidence to support that whatsoever, but it does make a lot of sense. I mean, if I was in government and I was in a decision-making body, that's probably what I would do, because there are a lot of really deliberate and legitimate threats right now, and it's kind of a catch-22, which we'll get into in a moment. But again, this is a very serious thing that warrants a lot more research, right? And here's why. The University of Washington already has a hit piece out on all of the content that has been made. Look at their nice, cute little flow chart here. Look, they've got a combination of a bar graph and like a heat map kind of thing going on here. Like, they put some money into this at UW, specifically not talking about the regulation, but talking about the people talking about the regulation. So they're tracking news stories, right? And they are literally naming names here. So if a very sketchily funded Center for an Informed Public at a American university is tracking this stuff and putting this much effort and funding into this, you can bet there's something behind it. And there's a little bit of concern. And ironically, if you read this article and you read this blog post, first of all, they keep changing it. And second of all, they don't really dispute any of the claims. The only thing they dispute is people conflating the manual versus the directive. Same number, but they're the manual versus the directive. That's what they're concerned about and talking about how this all fake news. It's not fake news. It's just you got to make sure you're talking about the directive and not the manual. Again, so this level of concern from an extremely liberal university and a very sketchily funded institute at this university, that should probably tell you all you need to know with how much you should be concerned about this. But just to alleviate some of those concerns more directly, do I think this is related to the election? Probably, maybe indirectly, but not specifically. They did not write this with this election in mind, okay? They wrote this over a period of years. I know how long these things take to write. They couldn't just bang this out over a weekend, right? Now, the release of it, yeah, probably. They want to make sure they're getting their ducks in a row for the election, but again, I don't think it has anything to do with the National Guard deployments. Again, there's other regulations and whole sections of U.S. code that dictate that already. What does this do? This makes it easier for a military drone to be used at a lower local level. Now, for anybody who has any experience in the kinetic targeting world, you know this is ridiculously hard to do. And it's not something that's going to just pop up overnight. So I'm not really concerned about it in the short term. However, you got to start somewhere, right? And this is creating the liaison relationships. People are setting up these things. The government and local authorities are working together. It's more deliberate. First of all, you got to make it legal, right? Legal in terms of a DoD directive. Is that even legal? I don't know. But either way, you've got to set the groundwork first so that this ball can get rolling in due time. I personally think the drone theory is probably the most likely explanation for this. It makes the most sense to me with that weird wording, because they're probably trying to allow armed drones to be used in a intelligence collection role. For the most part, just roll with it for a second. If you've got an armed one of these and an unarmed one of these, how many do you have that you can use domestically? One, right? Well, if you make them both legal, if you say, well, we're just going to take the Hellfires off the pylons on this one right here, and we're going to track a riot in Minneapolis with this one right here, but we're just going to take the Hellfires off, that makes it legal, right? Well, under the previous regulations, questionable. There's going to be questions there. Now, it's like, oh yeah, it's fine. It makes it a little bit easier for a general or a commander or a police chief to say, yeah, that's fine, we can do that. So yeah, that's, I think, what this is mostly about. I think it's expanding the number of aerial assets that are available to local law enforcement in a situation where that might be needed. Now, here's the problem with that. We already kind of have this with regards to the combat air patrols that are conducted around the United States. Do you think we're not conducting national defense? No, we're already using, whole air wings dedicated to, airspace defense, right? Whenever the Russians show up off the West Coast, the F-22s and F-15s out of Portland take right off, and there you go. So we have this already. However, it's a little bit of a different story. If you were to ask that air wing to say, hey, we're going to need a couple of your F-22s to come fly circles around this riot over here, that's a little bit questionable as to whether or not it's legal and as to whether or not people are going to feel comfortable doing it. So what does this regulation do? At the very minimum, this regulation makes military commanders, all the way down to the actual pilots themselves, more comfortable with what they're doing being legal. Okay? And that's not good. We do not want the military to feel comfortable doing things like this to the American people. But just to play devil's advocate for a moment and to think outside the box, I know that we're all terrified or concerned with the government trying to kill us these days, and that's a valid concern, but let's just step broadly for a moment. Any nation state, any government, any nation that exists is going to want to have territory defense, right? You want, a military to defend your homeland. That's basically one of the only reasons government actually exists in the first place. So, you want that military to be capable, right? But again, this is such a catch-22, right? So it's such a paradox because, I think a lot of people would have been really, really okay. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn, I don't know. But I think a lot of people would be okay with the military shooting down a hostile aircraft over American soil, or preferably before it gets here. That would have been really, really nice if the Air Force had gone out and shot down some hostile aircraft before it got here. Okay, intelligence collection on it later. No. Shoot it down first, and then we'll figure out what it is, right? Because we don't know if it has a nuclear warhead on board, to be honest, and we just let that thing get all the way across this country and didn't do anything about it. So, at that moment, in that situation, it would have been nice to have a strong Air Force, a strong military that can liaise with local authorities to make sure they can shoot the thing down and engage targets that might be, involving local authorities. Again, in the context of, say, the border crisis. If we've got dudes down at the southern U.S. border and they're standing 5 feet inside Mexico, okay, and they're pointing a man pad at commercial aircraft, I think I would be okay after PID is established and rules of engagement are adhered to. I think I would be okay with the Air Force dropping hellfire on that guy. You know what I mean? Like, I think we would all be a little bit more, okay with that. But here's the problem. Again, the paradox. Is it going to be used that way? Probably not. This is going to be used to target the people who the government thinks are the enemies and not the people who are actually the enemies. So, again, this is one of those things where I know a lot of people don't like talking about it, but look, man, look at what's going on here. We deploy tens and tens of thousands of troops to go stand around Washington, D.C. and make sure no one gets anywhere close to public structures, right? But we're not going to send that same number of troops to the southern U.S. border, or we're not going to send those same number of troops to help out with a hurricane. So again, it's such a paradox, because you want your government to defend your homeland and you want them to have the tools needed to do so. But currently, is there any government over the past 20 years, left or right, conservative or liberal, that has done this, that has approached this concept with magnanimity, with honor, with dignity, and done the right thing for this country? I very strongly doubt it. So this policy is probably a net negative. It really probably is, because we all know this is not going to be used in the correct way, just because of, again, this recent history. So if the Department of Defense and all those soldiers out there who are looking at this and saying, okay, cool, this allows us to do our job a little bit better and save America a little bit better. Well, for those of you who think that, maybe you should understand, or try to understand, where most American citizens are coming from. Okay, most American citizens looked at what has happened over the past 4 years, and they're a little bit concerned. So if you're in the military nowadays, you really have to go above and beyond to justify and alleviate the fears that your bosses have created. Okay, so there's a little bit of that. A lot of people don't understand the animosity that's there, and I think a lot of it is probably misplaced in some cases. But man, when you've got things like this, you're now turning that same relationship with the military into law enforcement. People are scared of cops because cops can kill them at any moment in time, and 9 times out of 10 they'll get off, right? Well, now you're starting to put that same culture there with the military. I think it's probably, considering how things are going, decently prudent for people to, have a little bit of healthy respect there. It doesn't mean that you have to go hate law enforcement or hate the military. You don't have to do that, but it would be really, really nice as if those in those roles could understand the healthy respect that has to be there. There has to be a little bit of healthy respect both ways, and there has to be a little bit of distance. Because when federal laws exist to allow certain kinds of behavior, the average citizen, I don't care how nice the person is, the average citizen has to think about those laws in the back of their head as to what they're able to do. So again, this is just going to further drive a wedge between the military and the citizenry, and it's going to drive law enforcement and military together a lot more. And I don't think that's going to end up being very, very good for the American people. So that's what I think about this sort of thing. It's kind of a contentious topic. I know a lot of people are probably not going to want to engage in the sort of nuance that's needed with this one. But again, I don't have any big answers for this. I just think, there's more to it than just being outraged at your government trying to kill you. I mean, your government's been trying to kill you for how many years now? So does this really change the overall picture of that? Well, it makes it a little bit more efficient, but in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really change a whole lot. And here's why. Like I mentioned, there are resources for you to check out. So here is your homework. If you are so inclined, you can read all of these documents yourself. The manual itself, the one that isn't really being changed at all, the 2016 manual, read that. The 2016 version is the latest version that I am aware of that you can find on their website. So this is the most recent version of the manual. There is the directive from 2024, read that for sure, and the directive from 2007, read that and compare the changes, because the 2007 version is radically different than the new one, the 2024 version. And why is it radically different? I think because of these documents. So if you want to understand how screwed you have been as an American for a long period of time, read these three. Read Executive Order 12333, again, right on the government website. And also read DoD Directive 5210.56. This is the governing document for the use of force. And you might find some similarities between the intelligence collection document, which is now like a kinetic targeting document, or at least trying to be, and this directive. So read that and see when it was published. It was published in 2016, but I think it goes back further than that, probably 2011 was when the initial document was written. But again, read what your government is authorized to do to you. And if you want to freak out a little bit more, or at least be educated in your freaking out, read JP 328, Joint Publication 3-28. This is Defense Support of Civil Authorities. If there's going to be some shenanigans going down, they're going to have to change this publication, because this publication, it describes and goes into detail of how the military can work with local law enforcement and civil authorities. So if you start seeing new liaison relationships popping up, new kinds of partnerships, new kinds of intelligence sharing, new kinds of kinetic targeting coming together, maybe a little bit, this publication is going to have to change. This one hasn't been changed since 2018, so if we start seeing changes to JP 328, if we start seeing changes to 5210.56, and if we start seeing changes to EO 12333, okay, that's when you should be actually, like, no kidding concerned. That may happen at some point. It would probably have to. But my guess, and my reason for talking so long on this, is that it's probably to do with allowing the use of armed drones on U.S. soil a little bit more efficiently, not necessarily for targeting now, but for the camera, so that they can use these kinds of assets more deliberately. Is it going to work out that way? I don't know. I mean, government policies always end up being the detriment of the American citizenry, so we'll have to figure out how this screws us over. But in any case, that's what I think about that. So let's put that one to bed for now. It's perfectly okay to be concerned in a reasonable manner that is productive and helpful at the end of the day. Just being outraged over what your government's doing to you doesn't really do anything, right? So this hopefully should trigger us a set of a different mindset and start allowing people to re-examine how federal resources are actually helping them or hurting them, and not jump right to straight antagonism, but start to develop that relationship a little bit differently, if you know what I mean. So again, let's close this one out for now and move on to the Southeast region. Again, really just wanted to kind of highlight some little tidbits from the Hurricane Helene recovery. It's still continuing. There's still a lot of roads out. They're doing their best to bring things back online. Most of the efforts are still volunteer. The feds are getting a little bit more efficient, but like I wrote in the Wire a few days ago, they're not really helping too much on the FEMA side of things. So it's become really a kind of a contentious thing. Those false reports of the whole militia scare, that sort of thing has hopefully been debunked by now, but mainstream media is still going with it. There's no militia concern out there. There's really nothing. You've got one or two people who've made like very vague threats on Facebook, and then suddenly they deploy armed, escorts for federal, resources. Ridiculous. I think they're just using it as an excuse to not do their job. So, again, that has cost us probably about a week or so, and you're starting to see a little bit of antagonism building. I mean, the feds are creating the exact conditions that they are trying to avoid, allegedly. So, again, everyone seems to be working okay. They're working together with each other. Local resources are working with volunteers who are working with the feds. It's just the feds are really slow. They're usually in the way. They're not doing a whole lot. And it's become kind of a problem. On the military side of things are going swimmingly well as far as I can tell. Some inefficiencies here and there, but before, jumping on the whole outrage train again with like specific incidents that you may hear about, just wait a couple of days. Wait a couple of days and see what's going on. For the most part, now we're in the recovery stage. So again, there are, still concerns to, life, limb, property sort of thing. People are still, now that cold weather has moved in, this has created a whole other set of complications. However, we can definitely spare just a few moments to rationally think about things when it comes to, did this event really happen? Is this really the way that it is? Because again, you have to remember, please remember this above everything else. What you're seeing on social media is one person to another one person. So you may see a report of somebody being like, shut out of something, or the feds like, screwing them over or something like that. That's just one person's experience. Somebody else, 5 minutes away or, 50 yards away may have a completely different experience. So you have to remember this. It's often contradictory, and that doesn't mean that the first person was lying about their experience. You just have to realize experiences are compartmentalized, very much so in this crisis. Some people working out of, Asheville may have infinite problems with FEMA, whereas, somebody up closer to the Tennessee border might have no problems with FEMA because they're just not there, right? You might have other people in different areas have problems with this or that or the other, and then somebody else 50 miles away, something completely different. So again, don't draw your overall experience of the event by just one person's testimony. Understand what's going on, and understand that you're not really going to have a whole lot of reports that kind of corroborate each other. So again, the flow of information is very much a problem. Now, one of the things that's kind of developing is the overall kind of feeling that in some areas recovery might not happen. This has been kind of a rumor going around for a few days, and it's been spurred on by Roy Cooper, the governor, his statements on the matter, stating that basically some areas should not be, rebuilt. So that's caused a lot of concerns. How's that shaking out on the ground? I don't really know. I don't think that there's the attitude of just intentionally like we're going to stop aid to this area and just tell those people to leave. That's not happening as far as I can tell. But there is kind of the general sentiment of, well, dang it, this entire road is missing. There's nowhere to put a new road, so we're probably just going to have to not build this road here again and build another one somewhere else. That's probably how it's working out in real life. As far as like per individual property, no fidelity on that. I'm sure BlackRock will swoop in and do the whole Lahaina treatment again, but still, right now, it's still definitely a recovery sort of thing. What's also been a little bit more illuminating is the lack of certain kinds of federal assets. Again, something that I've just kind of been thinking about since this crisis began is, where are the big industrial efforts to kind of fix the transportation needs so they don't have to rely on helicopters so much? Where's the Army Corps of Engineers? Where are the Seabees, from the Navy guys? Where are these large combat construction units? I mean, last time I checked, the guys who built the pier, out there in Gaza, they're not doing anything right now. So, why are we not activating these kinds of resources? Why are we not thinking in terms of building something great in terms of some of these roads that are down? So far, you're really just seeing DOT guys and improvisation for the most part. Now, I'm not saying you should drop a $500,000 combat bridge or pontoon bridge or something to access 5 people's houses. That'd be a waste of resources. But still, you got to wonder, where's the overall coordination from this? They're treating this like it's a hurricane in the coast. And it's not a hurricane in the coast. It's a hurricane in the mountains. This sucker kept rotation in the mountains. This is a big deal, and it's a whole different ball game. So, again, the general feeling of, well, federal help is needed, much bigger assets are needed, we need heavy lift helicopters, we need big machinery in many cases, but also the feds kind of screw up everything they touch, so what do? I don't know. It's a mess. It's getting better. The volunteers are making it better. A lot of the State Guard guys are doing awesome work out there too and making things get a little bit better, but for the most part, it's still going to be a mess for a very long period of time. So, I don't know. I just get the feeling from a lot of the reaction from like the feds that this is like their first hurricane they've ever responded to. Like FEMA apparently learned nothing from Katrina. They learned nothing from Lahaina. They learned nothing, and they haven't implemented any of this stuff either. So either way, you're going to see a lot of complaints over the next few weeks, I'm sure, and it's just going to kind of, be like the whole Maui thing, I think, but on a much larger scale for sure. So switching out to the southwestern region, we'll switch gears quite significantly and briefly mention the nationwide meat recall. This actually started back on October 9th. I can't remember if I mentioned it then or now, but it's actually steadily increased. Now it includes 12 million pounds of meat, which is a lot considering that most of this contamination, this listeria contamination, occurred from one factory, and they just spread the contamination everywhere. So they keep sampling new places, like shipments from this place from a while back, and finding listeria in it, even though it's, so it's expanded quite significantly in terms of like the batch numbers they have tested and things like that. So again, processed foods, man. This kind of thing is very, very common with prepackaged processed foods, unfortunately, especially stuff that's meant to be fresh or decently fresh, So again, something to be concerned with. Check out and see if you have any of those processed foods that are on the lists. You could just Google it and find the list from the USDA to see if you have any of that tainted food. And finally, moving out west, I did not mention it in the wire, but I should have. On Friday, a EA-18 Growler crashed into Mount Rainier with rescue teams reaching the crash site yesterday, and they haven't really said what's going on with the status of the crew. First they were missing. Now it's kind of the general feeling that there were probably 2 fatalities with this. So again, not much information, but the search for the aircraft is over. It's on Mount Rainier on the eastern side. So again, very little information, but as we can see, this does continue the trend of military aviation mishaps, incidents, accidents that have occurred over the past couple of years. And finally, let's jump overseas for a moment to the Far East Theater. Just wanted to briefly touch on the Chinese drills that occurred in the vicinity of Taiwan. Again, this is why context is important, because you might see these reports of 100 and something aircraft and dozens of ships off the coast of Taiwan or surrounding Taiwan. That's what the mainstream media said, surrounding Taiwan. They're technically correct, but if you had a calendar, you'd understand that this was October 10th, double 10 day for Taiwan. Kind of, it's not like their Independence Day, but it's like it celebrates the Wuchang Uprising, which kind of led to the development of the nation-state of Taiwan. So it's basically like their national holiday, or one of their national holidays. They have a few. And China always, of course, likes to remind them of their fate, so to speak, by doing these big drills around Taiwan on their holidays. Of course, this is, again, a Chinese trick, right? That's what they're really good at, this 5th generation war kind of stuff. So really, you have to realize that you have to understand the region a lot better to determine, okay, is this a pretend drill, or is this the real thing? Since this was not that many ships and not that many aircraft, it's just a drill. It would be thousands. It would be thousands of ships and thousands of aircraft mobilizing, and it's going to take them a little while. So again, a couple hundred aircraft from all around the country doing these drills. It may seem to be scary at first, but it'll be a whole lot worse if China decides to militarily go for Taiwan. Again, big if, but if they do, that's what it'll look like. And wrapping things up with the GhostNet, again, I didn't really get that many reports this time around. I think solar weather is still kind of affecting me, but I did get one really clear report from somebody out in Texas, which was very strange because I couldn't hear. HF radio is weird, right? I couldn't hear anybody locally. I couldn't hear anybody that I normally hear, but I got this guy very, very clearly. A couple of drop characters here and there, but for the most part, it worked out pretty well. So, again, still working on version 1.5 of the GhostNet. I will release that as soon as I finish some doctrine writing on it. But yeah, 1.4 is still the most recent version of that. So that's pretty much all I have for today. Here are the sources. Again, for all of you who are concerned about kind of the DoD directive thing, all of the links for that are in the description, so you can easily click them, but they're also going to be on the slides as well. So that's pretty much all I have for today. Thank you guys all for watching. Thank you guys for your support, and we will see you next time. And as always, fight in the shade.